know you.
Most people in the audience know who I am. I'm Esther Voet, and I'm deputy director of CIDI. And shall I go straight on to?
No, let's first make sure that people have. Well,
too greedy.
You probably know, but let's be polite. Then we have Frans Verhagen. He is a specialist on America. Maybe a short introduction as well.
I studied in the United States. I've been working in the United States for 30 years. I've written 12 books, 10 of which were about the United States. And I studied, this is the most recent one, available here, $9.95. I learned marketing too in the US. I studied at Columbia University, and that's where I studied international relations, but I'm a sociologist and a lawyer by training in Holland.
So talking about a specialist in our midst about the United States. Thank you, Frans. Then we have our Excellency, the ambassador of Israel in the Netherlands. For how many? Not that long. I think almost a year now.
Yeah, just over a year.
Just over a year now.
Arrived end of August last year.
Yeah. And we met earlier in The Hague half a year ago. Half a year later, you're now well used to the Dutch customs. Still Dutch appreciated customs, with the Dutch customs?
To the Dutch weather. Everything is fine, heel goed.
Well, I can imagine that you're glad that you're in Holland and not in the United States, because that's what they have, real bad weather.
Well, some parts, unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
Could be in California.
And then we have Damon Golriz. He has, well, basically Iran specialist, publisher, writing columns. Where do you write? Where do you publish? Where can people find your materials?
Very different websites. I try to write in Persian, Dutch and English, different fields. I don't call myself a specialist, I think it's too much. But I try, from my point of view, to write about the happenings, internal politics of Iran, also to involve myself in the Netherlands to this issue. And it's very I'm very honored to be here. I think I wasn't even born when Mr. Ambassador was working at the embassy in Canada. So it's a honor.
I couldn't wait. So. This is not an Israeli-Iranian conflict. This is a conflict between Iran and the, I would say, the Western Hemisphere, the Western world. Those who share the same values of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And to characterize it as an Israeli conflict is a little bit misleading. I mean, and I'll elaborate, of course, later, but this is very important to set the parameters. This is a conflict between Iran and the international community. So we are, of course, supporting the position of the Americans and other countries that Iran shouldn't go nuclear. We are hoping that the sanctions will work. I mean, the sanctions are biting already, but not yet to make the Iranians abandon their program. So therefore, the next step should be to escalate the sanctions. Another thing that we are saying very loud and clear, that Israel will always know how to look after its security needs. Of course, if like in the past, if we'll know what to do if it will reach to that level, but we hope and we think it won't, because the Americans are very, very clear about what's going to happen or what shouldn't happen. So the Americans are at the lead, and of course we are supporting any attempt, any move, any efforts of the Americans, especially when it comes to sanctions, because no one wants to see a military conflict, no one wants to see bloodshed, but no one wants to see the Iranian going nuclear.
In the first place, I don't think there's a general agreement that the world would change if Iran went nuclear. In Foreign Affairs, 3 issues ago, it's the Vakblad, what do you call it, the magazine of the foreign policy community. There was an article where somebody actually argued quite coherently that nuclear arms cannot be used. So a new sense of deterrence, mutual deterrence in the Middle East wouldn't change that much. It would make it more stable. So that is not a case closed. And I'm pretty convinced, and I'm trying to speak here as somebody who's talking about America, not about my own opinions about Europe. I just want you to think about this. This is not the general agreement. There are a lot of people dissenting from this opinion. About American foreign policy in general, there is a huge continuity between presidents. Even between President Bush and Obama, there was a huge continuity, including in the Middle East. Neither of them has done anything, or has been able to do anything. In 8 years of President Bush, nothing has happened. In 4 years of President Obama, nothing much has happened either. What I do think has happened, and I say this as an analysis, is that in general, I think Europeans and maybe Israelis overestimate the issue, overestimate the importance of the issue of Israel support in the United States. I don't think that the United States will go to war over an Iran nuclear bomb. The American people are not ready to go to war, another war in the Middle East, no way. This will not necessarily mean that they will allow Iran to get a nuclear bomb. I think there is a big opening. In June, there are going to be elections in Iran. Maybe we can talk about that later. There might be a different president. There might be enough pressure. The pressure might have been enough of the current policy to make them change their minds. And there might be an agreement where there's actually an opening up with Iran 4 years after Obama stretched his hand or opened his, unclenched his fist, as he called it. There actually may be an opening, and I think that will be the way, that's the trajectory to prevent Iran from going the whole way. And finally, let me say one thing that may, no, it won't shock you actually. I think Mr. Netanyahu has made a serious mistake and has not done his country a service by lining himself up with the Republican Party in the way that he did. He became part of the campaign. He went to the Republican convention. He was pushing Romney. I think that was a not, let me be polite, a not very smart move. And I think it will work against him, it will work against Israel, and it will work against the interests of Israel when push comes to shove. Let me leave it to that for now.
Mr. Ambassador said something about this is not an Israeli-Iran issue, but it's the world against Iran. I think we have a triangle relationship between Iran, US, and Israel. And it's a triangle in which if one of the angles fall down with war or something else, the other two will also be unstable. There is a let's say, a division in Israeli politicians who think the Iranian officials are irrational. Those encourage a war, a preemptive strike. Those take for real the sayings of Khamenei calling Israel a cancer tumor, or Ahmadinejad who wants to wipe off Israel from the map. And those officials, Israeli officials, think a preemptive strike would be the best possible option to solve the problem. At the other hand, there are Israeli officials who think, in my opinion, Iranian officials are very rational. They will not start a war. There is a difference between the rhetorical sayings and their actions. Of course, they support proxies in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and also Sudan this week. But there is a difference between these policies, the ideology, and international politics executed by them. On the terms of sanctions, sanctions are working in the sense of the authorities, they are doing all they can to take off the pressure on the people. The people are also suffering from the sanctions. At the other hand, we can see that the sanctions hasn't still made the decision makers in Iran convince them, convince them to change their policies. And I don't think that will be happen till the elections of June, presidential elections of June, which will be a very important elections to see what's going on. I don't think people of Iran will have a will not have a very important role in this election, but it's very important internally to see who is going to be the right hand, the executive right hand of Khamenei, who decides, and the executive right hand will do what he says, because Ahmadinejad is not listening to him anymore. So there are a lot of other issues. I hope we can discuss it later on.
Well, the thing is that I would like to take it over immediately. The thing is, the Khamenei is also not listening to Ahmadinejad anymore, because one of the big friends of Ahmadinejad is right now in prison. He is serving a 6-month sentence for insulting Khamenei, and Ahmadinejad wanted to visit him this week and got the no from Khamenei. So in front of the whole Iranian public, Ahmadinejad was forbidden to visit his friend in prison, which is pretty something.
That's exactly, Esther, the point I tried to make, that if this European delegation was in Iran, they wouldn't give legitimacy to the Iranian in the West for the Iranian people.
I completely disagree. For the winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace to visit Iran while you just have enlarged the sanctions, it would have been a complete double message that you would have sent.
The German delegation was in Iran.
I'm sorry,
too.
we're not into discussion yet, because now it's my 5 minutes and I'm going to take it.
I thought we were in discussion.
Write it down and come back to it later.
I think it would have given a completely wrong signal, and I agree with Mr. Ambassador. I'm sorry, but I really do. That the way to go right now are the sanctions. I think that for Israel to do a preemptive strike is a very risky business. First, we don't know the outcome. We don't know whether it's technically possible. We don't know whether what will be the fallout for the other countries. Right now, the whole Middle East is in turmoil, and you know, you never know what's going to happen, and it might pull together again the Islamic world. And last but not least, there was another point, and I forgot about it. There is a fourth point. I will get back to that. Anyway, oh yeah, no, I know it. You know, everybody pretty much agrees that once you do the preemptive strike, it will probably only be a setback. It will not be something that will completely erase the Iranian nuclear program. It will probably set it back for about 5 years. And is it worth the trouble?
World leadership, it's also about taking into account the unwanted scenarios. Israel, there's so much at stake that it's hard to believe that the unwanted scenarios are not discussed, are not thought through. So let's just, for the sake of the argument, say that France is indeed right. That at some point the reports are showing up that that Iran is actually there, and that the United States is saying we cannot afford a new war.
I didn't say that, but
no,
go ahead.
No, but that's the scenario I'm creating. I mean, it's hard to believe that Israel has not a policy thought of, maybe in a very deep secret drawer, I don't know. What can the world expect in such a situation?
Okay. Those secret drawers are not in The Hague. But to be more serious, we are living in our neighborhood, in our crazy neighborhood. Security is #1 issue on our agenda, exactly. Unfortunately. Yeah. Unfortunately. So we have to prepare ourselves for everything. I mean, prepare ourselves in terms of, in defensive. I mean, we are today just as concerned of what's happening with what's going to happen with the chemical arsenal of the Syrians if Assad regime will collapse. And this is a threat. Not, you know, everyone is looking at Israel. This is not just a threat to Israel. This is the minute you have extreme groups which are operating in Europe. Mm-hmm. We have already terrorist attacks in Europe. Just think of that. So, of course, we have to be prepared. But again, we are absolutely convinced that with the very determined approach and declarations of the two presidential candidates, we can. They will lead the campaign. I'm not talking about the military campaign, a campaign. But at the same time, we are not dismantling IDF. It's still there.
Because, Frans, if we look at the region and we see where the military, U.S. military arms are, they're basically everywhere around Iran.
Yeah, but they promised, in both the programs, mostly in Obama's program, the Navy would be for 60% in the Pacific. They don't want to stay in the Middle East. That's part of the long-term policy. They want to extract themselves from it. And I didn't say that the United States would necessarily, well, actually, if they had no other options than allowing Iran to do it, I think they would do it without striking. And I think the debate, and that's why I made this statement that there is no general agreement that a nuclear Iran is unacceptable, because there are some people who are saying that it's perfectly acceptable. And before we get to a point where the United States gets involved, that debate is going to be held at the highest levels of foreign policy officials. And I'm not entirely sure what the outcome will be. I don't pay too much attention to what they say in the campaigns. They cannot say anything else. It's a word game. Ahmadinejad can say that he will destroy Israel. That's words. Romney will say that he will do anything to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear arm. It's words too. In the end, it comes down to policy. And the policy will be in the American national interest. And I'm trying to do this as an analysis of the United States. Yeah. Don't count on the eternal and unequivocal support of the United States.
Is it Divon?
Yeah, just to one comment. When it comes to Ahmadinejad, we take his words very seriously. It's not just words. We take it very seriously. That's number one. Number two, why we are pretty convinced that whatever the two candidates are saying is serious, because it is not just a presidential campaign rhetoric, but it is supported by the two parties. Congress, Senate, their full support. So it is not that they will have to try and convince now Congress, etc. Here there is the full support, bipartisan support of...
what I'm saying is it's a diplomatic position. You cannot take any other position at this point. So they're taking it, they're supporting it. I'm not entirely sure that when push comes to shove that they will stick to it. And you have to worry about that too.
Well, okay. Of course, therefore I say, of course we are worried, but we hope that that will be the course of action.
Because, Damon, we're having this debate here. Debate is being debated in the United States, within Europe, within Israel.
How with Iran?
How in Iran? I mean,
you know, if you want to understand Iranians, you have to understand the dualism which is in the Iranian culture. There is no Iranian politician who cannot write down a poem. There is always a dualism in the Iranians. They say A, they mean B. They say B, they mean C. Mr. Ambassador said we take Ahmadinejad's words very serious. I think that's a huge mistake, because when Ahmadinejad came to United States and he asked for 5 times, we want to have a dialogue with the Americans, with the West, nobody listened to him. Why? Because everybody knows that the policymaker and the decision is is made by Khamenei. Don't take Ahmadinejad's words very serious. I can understand the threat. I can understand it is very difficult to, but at this stage, you have to understand the dualism in the Iranian politics. Let me just make another point. We are talking about the Iranian and the bomb.
Should we then trust on Khamenei?
Of course. I mean, not trust.
Shouldn't trust anybody.
Not trust, but
in
you
foreign
have to
policy, you don't trust people.
No. not trusting Khamenei, but
remember
I think
Obama's letter. Remember Obama's letter to the Iranian government that never, thank you so much, that never got an answer. I mean, it was Obama who reached out to the Iranian government, and Obama who wrote a letter to the Iranian government, and they never got an answer. And the big problem within Iran, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, is not that is not so much the regime, the mullah regime. I think the big problem in Iran is that the opposition is so incredibly dispatched and so fighting amongst each other that they can't make a fist. This is the huge problem of Iran.
we talk about Iran getting bombed. I think Iran has the capability and the possibility of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to be nuclear ready, as we call it, but not make the bomb. That means that you can enrich uranium above 90%, that it can be used for a nuclear bomb, but don't make the bomb. Let's just say the same case as Japan as follows. You can make it as in a few weeks. And I agree with Mr. Verhagen, Frans, that United States and I don't think Israel will attack Iran. There will not be a preemptive strike. The risks are too much. The Iranian nation are very nationalistic. They will unite the Iranian nations and the Iranian state. And a lot of other problems. Think about the proxies of Iran. Iran has 16 neighboring countries.
Damon, I mean
16 neighboring countries. Let me just finish this. 16 neighboring countries is very different than South Africa, who went on his knees because of the economical sanctions. The only solution, and I agree with you in that case, Esther, is not to attack Iran. It's not only sanctions. Is to help the Iranian nations. The only thing you can do besides sanctions is to tell the Iranian officials that we are very serious. We don't really want you to have the nuclear bomb, and at the same time help the opposition of Iran to get unified. And that doesn't mean to utilize the MKO and the Kurdish parties and the Azeri parties who are violating the national sovereignty of Iran, which is a problem for the Iranian people.
Esther.
MKO is not legitimate, has no legitimacy for the Iranian people.
Esther, please. You wanted to respond the way you were reacting. Too much on the table.
There is a lot on the table, and I'm, you know, we can't solve it from here, and for sure from an Israeli point of view you can't solve it from here. This is a problem that will need to be solved by the Iranian minorities and the Iranian groups. And as I see it, the Iranians are a very proud people, and that can work with you and it can work against you. And if you know you're so divided that your pride is working against you, get over it, swallow your ego, get together, and, you know, make happen what has to be done, and that is get out of this mullah tunnel. Because you would be, as Iran, you would be a beautiful example for the other Islamistic countries right now who are diving right into that tunnel.
I don't think a patronizing attitude towards Iran will do any good, frankly.
But you know, what other way is there?
You don't have to tell them that they shouldn't like the mullahs. They can do that for themselves. And I think we should stay out of Iranian internal politics. I want to add that sanctions can be suffered for a very long time. Fidel Castro has done it for 50 years.
Exactly.
Smaller country, different environment. A country that's under pressure and thinks that it's in the national interest to do something, the sanctions won't stop it in the end. It will impoverish the country, it will make them against everybody else, but it will not stop the policy.
Mr. Ambassador, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that if nothing changed from now to, let's say, July 2013, a military strike will be inevitable? will happen?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, is it logical? Is it illogical?
No, you know, it's the entire issue is not logical. I mean, the entire issue of a country that is, you know, the only country in the world that is actually saying very openly, we are acquiring nuclear capability in order to destroy another country. It's not logical.
That's your interpretation.
Yes,
Not exactly.
No.
I have all, and I'll be more than happy to have all the quotations. It's not that we are.
But how do you imagine that you can use a nuclear bomb on Israel without being destructed yourself?
Well, of course, we know what the ramifications. So what should we do?
No.
Shall we return to Europe? I mean, what should we do? Should we return to Europe?
Suppose Iran has a nuclear arm. You think they will use it?
We are not going to take any chance. Everyone wants to hear a statement saying that we are going to attack on the 5th of, what's today, February. You know,
I'd rather not hear that.
No. You know, this is. No one said so, and no one will say so, because this is not the case. What we are saying all the time, and I thought I was clear by saying that what we are pretty convinced that the position of the two presidential candidates is so firm and they are so determined not to allow Iran going nuclear, and therefore we are counting on that, because it is being said by the leaders of the free world. They have the support of other major superpowers, and therefore we are thinking that this is the right course of action. Sanctions so far are working, not fast enough, but they are working. Some of the leaders, Iranian leaders, are admitting that because they cannot admit it out in the open, but they do admit it.
Yeah.
And let's hope that that will prevent any major conflict which no one wants.
Is the Iran regime ideologically based, or are they using the religious ideology just to play power games, and that there, as we spoke about irrational, rational leadership, is it a really through ideology-based regime?
I don't think so, actually. I think you have to take it very seriously, what they say, and it's horrible if they're saying that Israel must be whipped off the map, or it's a cancer, or all Zionists are rats or whatever. It's horrible. I mean, you have to take it serious. But the question is, do you have to take it so serious to construct your policy on those words or not? As I said, Ahmadinejad is the same guy who came to UN and asked for 5 times to have a dialogue with the West, and they didn't allow that. How does it happen? It's the same person, and is actually at this moment one of the biggest rivals of Khamenei. So I don't think you have to be very serious about what they're saying, listen to it, but understand also the Iranian dualism, which is very important cultural thing.
Last point I would really like to make.
Everyone behind the table gets 30 seconds CNN broadcasting time. I mean, on CNN you have to explain the situation in the world in 30 seconds. So Esther, you're first, and then we just follow.
The interesting thing about that we have completely left out here tonight is the fact that if Iran would get a nuclear device, there's bound to be a reaction, not so much only from Israel, but what do you think about Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia within the Middle East is the biggest enemy of Iran, and I would say, if I was a Saudi, I would say, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, well, if you're Iranian, you would also say, wait a minute.
So,
okay, point taken. Thank you.
You know, you would have a new nuclear arms.
I have 30 seconds still.
30 seconds, yes.
Well, 30 seconds is, would the Iranians be totally irrational if they think that Israel might use the bomb on them one day?
Something to take home and think about. Damon? And I'll finish with Mr. Ambassador.
I think Iranian people, they want peace, friendship, and freedom, especially with the Israelis in the region. We are both not Arabic, we are both has a huge, I mean, a past that we help each other in different ways, and I hope we will someday we will be friends and visit each other in the same country.
Mr. Divon.
I endorse it full-heartedly. I remember when my parents used to return from visits in the 60s from Iran, bring us lovely goodies, and being so impressed. And we hope we'll see those days again. But right now, again, we cannot. We have to take very seriously the aggressive, threatening rhetoric of all the leaders of Iran. But it's not that we are convinced. It's first and foremost the Americans, and they realize that they have a problem. It is not like India and Pakistan, because there you have responsible leadership. It's not like Cuba.
In Pakistan?
Still, and it's not like Cuba, because Cuba, when the minute the Americans were threatened, they acted. They acted. So again, we are of course very alerted, and we hope that the Americans will continue and will stand by their commitment not to allow Iran going nuclear.